Inside Science.
Is voting by mail biased towards either US political party? Now, unless you've been living under a rock for the last 3 months, you'll have heard politicians of all stripes arguing the case. If COVID-19 makes voting in person dangerous, then many people may need to vote by mail. So it's incredibly important to know if this method might favour one side or the other. So that's what a study published this month set out to test. The study looked at 2 states, Utah, which leans Republican, and Washington, which leans Democratic. Over the last 25 years, both of those states have gradually changed their voting from in-person to primarily by mail. They also have data on overall voter turnout and individual voters' political parties. So the researchers examined how changing to voting by mail affected overall turnout and whether it led to changes in the portion of votes for Republicans or Democrats. And according to their results, voting by mail slightly increased overall turnout by about 2 to 3%, but did not significantly favour either party. In fact, the effect on overall turnout is so modest that the authors suggest that voting by mail has about the same effect as a non-partisan get out and vote phone call or a socially pressuring mail-out. The paper concludes that mail-in voting would not substantially advantage either political party, which makes it a viable approach for carrying out the 2020 election during this pandemic. And speaking of the pandemic, we've also learned more about COVID-19 itself this month. And it all started with a mysterious observation. A laboratory in California were trying to map out what bits of the SARS-CoV-2 virus our immune system can learn to recognise. To do that, they were using T cells from blood samples taken 2 or more years ago, before SARS-CoV-2 appeared. But when they started testing these naive T cells, they found that some of them already recognised the virus. How is that possible if SARS-CoV-2 wasn't even around then? The researchers wondered if maybe these pre-COVID T cells had encountered other viruses that were similar to SARS-CoV-2. So they tested some common coronaviruses that were around when the blood was taken to see if they resembled SARS-CoV-2. What they found was 4 other viruses that shared parts of their structure with SARS-CoV-2. So they activated the T cells in the same way. But these 4 viruses don't cause COVID-19. They cause the common cold. So it seems like common cold coronaviruses can teach your immune system to recognize SARS-CoV-2. And the researchers tentatively suggest that this might explain why some parts of the population are more resistant than others to COVID-19 because they've been exposed to these common cold viruses. So their T cells can now recognize and attack SARS-CoV-2. And when the pandemic is finally over and we start returning to normal, the way in which we return will have massive impact on our climate. The world saw carbon dioxide and air pollutants plummet during lockdown because we drastically changed our behaviour. But if this is just a blip and we go back to powering our economic recovery with fossil fuels, this momentary dip in emissions will end up saving only 0.01 degrees of planetary temperature rise. That's according to a new modelling paper from the UK. But the authors also point out an opportunity. If we choose to emphasise a green recovery, that is, emphasising green economic stimulus packages and divesting from fossil fuels, by 2030, temperature rise will slow down. Their model suggests that this would give us a good chance, around 55%, of keeping total global heating to below 1.5 degrees centigrade, in line with the Paris Climate Agreement. And that is what we should aim for, because the effects of climate change have already started, and I don't like what I see. The tropics have started expanding, pushing hot, dry, arid areas outwards into regions like Southern California, the Mediterranean, and Southern Australia. Now, researchers from Germany suggest that this is driven, paradoxically, by the oceans. Heating the oceans moves the position of the gyres, huge areas of water, thousands of miles wide, that spin, taking warm water from the tropics towards the poles. Ocean heating is pushing gyres closer to the poles and heating up their neighbouring land masses. And the heating of the tropics is forcing species out of their original habitats towards the once temperate zones. A study of 390 waterbird species, looking at over 1.3 million records, found that the number and the richness of bird species has decreased nearer the equator and started rising towards the poles, which might not be so bad if you can fly, but is a big problem if you can't move. Tree species that thrive in colder climates are starting to be replaced by those that can withstand greater heat. Cold-loving trees can only move poleward as far as their seeds will travel, or grow on higher ground where it's cooler, or simply go extinct. Limited options. And for fans of waffles at breakfast, that's a big problem. The Canadian sugar maple tree is one of those cold-growing trees losing their habitat. No more sugar maple, no more maple syrup. And on that bombshell, that's it from me this month. Stay safe. Goodbye.
Inside Science. If you enjoyed this edition, follow us on the web and social media. Powered by the American Institute of Physics.